Welcome. Hello. No rookie moves tonight. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It is Mysterious Forces Live. It is Friday, April 12th, 2019. Welcome, one and all. Sometimes it's interesting on playback to hear the music sound kind of glitchy due to the delay in the music. What's it called? It's there's a digital principle at work. Can't remember what that is. Thank you for being here. It is, like I said, Mysterious Forces Live on a Friday night. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. Tonight I'm going to do a book review, and tomorrow I have a fabulous guest on. Laird Scranton is coming back on, and Laird is a well-known anthropologist. He is an expert in the Denisovan people and ancient cultures, cultural anthropology. I don't know how I stumbled on that. Cultural anthropology, also physical anthropology he deals with. And I'm hoping that we're going to talk a little bit, at least, about the recent discovery, that the information that was released about the archaeological find or wow, there's my rookie move. Anthropological find in the Philippines this week. So that'll be interesting. There's been a lot of interesting, crazy stuff in the news. And it's crazy. Just a weird week for news. I've been solidifying my plans to go to Boston to appear on Paranormal Hood with Jiggy and the Smoke King on Paranormal Hood, the podcast. And I'll be going to Boston at the end of the month. And we have some very special pre-recorded interviews lined up. Excuse me. And we're going to be presenting those pre-recorded interviews for you. And they are excellent guests. And I'm not going to say who they are quite yet. Also, we're going to have a 420 special broadcast with Hot Rock Superjoint. He was so funny and so fun when he was here the first time that I could not let 420 go by without inviting him back on. So we'll have a special broadcast. I'm not quite sure what day 420 falls on. Let's see. It is a Saturday. So that'll be our Saturday broadcast. Next week, 420, will be an episode with Hot Rock Superjoint. So we have some great guests getting lined up. And I've been doing my research. And so we've got a lot of good stuff coming up. I don't mean to be... my throat is all scratchy. This has been happening a lot lately. I need to, maybe there's something I need to drink. And believe it or not, honey is not a good thing. People think that it's good for a singer to drink honey or eat honey when they're singing, but actually coat your vocal cords, and it's not good. So anyway, tonight, what am I doing? I'm reviewing The Secrets of the FBI by Ronald Kessler. Now, once again, this is not a paid promotion of any kind. I bought this book with my own money, and as a matter of fact, it's not even a new book. It was released in 2011. So there's a little bit of age on this, but actually it gives a little bit of interesting perspective because people like Robert Mueller feature prominently in this book. Excuse me. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Ronald Kessler, and then we'll get into some of the content of the book, and we'll go from there. So this is a new thing, and I'm trying it together. And it is really hot in here. Okay. So who is Ronald Kessler? I'll give you what he says about himself in the back of the book. Ronald Kessler is the New York Times bestselling author of In the President's Secret Service, The Terrorist Watch, The CIA at War. A former Washington Post and Wall Street Journal investigative reporter, Kessler has won 17 journalism awards, including the George Polk Award for National Reporting or Reportage and for community service. He is chief Washington correspondent of Newsmax.com. Kessler lives in Potomac, Maryland, with his wife, Pamela. That's what he would like you to know about him. I found a website called bustle.com, and they were asking, who is Ronald Kessler? And actually, at this point, he has written 21 books. So he's a fairly prolific author, and he's made the rounds on the mainstream news network, especially CNN. He's been on State of the Union with Jake Tapper. And he's recently written a book on the Trump White House, and it's called The Trump White House, Changing the Rules of the Game. And so I guess that was kind of a hit for him. He is a conservative, I guess, politically. And even though I don't delve into politics on this show, I found it interesting. I did notice that there was a certain flavor to this book. And if I would say anything, that he liked to dish on scandals that had to do with a lot of Democrats and Clinton era years and stuff like that. And he certainly has some spy stories and things like that. But this is by no means a tell-all that's focusing on any Republicans, let's put it that way. But I guess he dished a little dirt on Trump in his latest book. This might be, who knows? It depends on the book. This is a little gossipy for my personal taste. It's a little bit salacious. For instance, there's a chapter in here on Edgar Hoover's relationship with his assistant and his cross-dressing and so on and so forth. And even though that's newsworthy, and it's certainly interesting to note that publicly, at least, Hoover was such a homophobe and actually persecuted the gay community here in America while he was head of the FBI. How ironic that someone who would be so homophobic in both policy and practice and philosophy, but then turn out to be a big giant closet case himself, right? But I'm not going to touch on that because, for one thing, it's been addressed, and I tried to look for some nuggets in here that was new stuff, or at least a new angle on some older news. So, bustle.com has Mr. Kessler listed as a conservative. I had looked at his website. He's written 21 books, and I thought I had the list here from Wikipedia, but some of his books. This guy is way, way, way into the Washington D.C. Insider loop. So anyway, look him up on Wikipedia if you want to know all 21 books. But a lot of it's FBI stuff, a couple of spy books. This falls right in line with the rest of his content. And I'm going to go over, let's see, who published this. This was, here's his books. Also by Ronald Kessler. I knew this was somewhere. In the President's Secret Service, The Terrorist Watch. Inside the Desperate Race to Stop the Next Attack. Laura Bush, An Intimate Portrait of the First Lady. I'll let that alone. The CIA at War. Inside the Secret Campaign Against Terror. The Bureau. The Season. Inside Congress. The Sins of the Father. Joseph P. Kennedy and the Dynasty He Founded. I'm sure that was full of scandal and naughtiness. Let's see. The Season, Inside Congress, The Sins of the Father, Inside the White House, the FBI, Inside the CIA, Escape from the CIA. I've seen Escape from New York and Escape from LA, but I've never seen Escape from the CIA. Does that have Kurt Russell in it as well? I would watch it. I kind of like Kurt Russell. The Spy in the Russian Club, Moscow Station, Spy versus Spy, and I used to read a lot of Mad Magazine, so I think that'd be entertaining as well. The Richest Man in the World, and I believe this was his first book, The Life Insurance Game. So that's that gives you a good idea of where this guy's head's at and what kind of work he's been doing. And I'm going to stop smacking my lips, I promise. The contents, I will read the one thing that's easy about this is these are kind of like, they're not as quite as trite as sound bites, but the chapters are kind of short, and this is easy to read. And this kind of plays out a little bit of just like kind of an encyclopedia of gossipy shit related to the FBI. And chapter 1 is TACOPS, TACOPS. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think a lot of these are names for operations. There's Omerta, Red Dress, and that's the Hoover bit. Secret Files, Break-In at the Watergate. I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is. Deep Throat. I'll let that alone. Profiling. Threesomes. I am going to read that one to you. Mole in the CIA. More roast beef. I wonder if the more roast beef has anything to do with the threesomes. Waco, the co-director wife. I didn't quite get to that one. Maybe we'll look at that together. Behind Vince Foster's suicide. I did hit this one pretty hard today, and we'll talk about it. Brick Agent, Catching Hansen. And maybe we'll get into this another time. I think that case is, it's got, you know, the movie Breach, and it's such a well-known case. It would almost deserve an episode of its own. Then, of course, chapter 16 is Breach. Unexplained Cash, Mueller, Homicide, Intelligence Mindset, The Center, The Hunt, Armed and Dangerous, Preaching Jihad, Year of the Ponzi Scheme. So I can imagine who that's about. Tripwires, Yacht Party, Christmas Day, Suitcase Nuke. That's always a good topic. CSI, Spy Swap. I wonder if that has anything to do with the threesomes either. Geronimo and The Biggest Threat. And obviously the Biggest Threat hadn't actually been elected yet. And so I'm going to go back to the chat room and just take a look and see who's in here so far. And I don't know why I'm talking in such a sing-songy voice. I never do that. Pursuing X. And wow, there's 300 people in this chat room. That's amazing. 300 people. Michael, I don't know how you're going to do it, but control them all somehow. Get control of this mob. This is insane. So anyway, one chapter that I wanted to zoom in on. We'll save that for last. We'll save the sex for last, right? Because that's usually some of the most salacious stuff. Behind Vince Foster's suicide. Vince Foster was associate White House counsel. He was found dead of suicide on July 20th, 1993 at 6:10 p.m. And he was discovered by someone who had actually gone into the woods there to urinate and saw the body, contacted the U.S. Park Service, and they called 911. Vincent W. Foster Jr., he was the deputy White House counsel. He was found dead from a .38 caliber revolver, gunshot wound in the mouth with an exit wound in the back of his head. And they found GSR on his hand. And I told you I would stop smacking my lips. I hate it when I do that. I don't want to hear myself. An autopsy determined that it was from a gunshot wound in his mouth, and it was from suicide. And I guess some people went through contortions to investigate his death and see if somehow, due to the conspiracy theories that were swirling around at the time that Vince Foster had been murdered, they wanted to absolutely rule that out. And after 3 different autopsies, or 3 different doctors had reviewed the case, they still all came back saying it was suicide. what people don't know, and the spin that Mr. Kessler puts on this story, is that even though it has not been determined in any way that Vince Foster was murdered, there is anecdotal evidence, if you want to interpret it that way, that Hillary Clinton did play a part in his suicide, and that Hillary Clinton had embarrassed and humiliated Mr. Foster in front of a large group of colleagues in the White House within a week before his suicide. And it says on page 108, as part of his broader I'll get this right. As part of his broader investigation into allegations surrounding Bill and Hillary Clinton's investment in the Whitewater real estate development, independent counsel Kenneth Starr investigated Foster's death. One reason that records involving Whitewater were in Foster's office. Starr retained current and former FBI agents to conduct interviews with those who dealt with Foster, both at the White House and in Little Rock. And I underline this point, and this is getting into the meat of it. Former FBI agent Coy Copeland was the senior investigator who read the reports of the other agents. According to Copeland, who turns out to be a big source for Kessler here, what never came out publicly was that the agents learned that about a week before his death, Hillary Clinton and Foster, who was her mentor at the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, held a meeting with other White House aides to go over the health care legislation that Hillary Clinton was proposing. Those who were present told the FBI agents working for Starr that Hillary violently disagreed with a local objection Foster raised at the meeting and humiliated Foster in front of aides, Copeland says. And I bracketed this. Hillary put him down really, really bad in a pretty good sized meeting, Copeland says. She told him he didn't get the picture. He would always be a little hick-town lawyer who was obviously not ready for the big time. Based on what dozens of others who had contact with Foster after that meeting told the agents, the put down that she gave him in that big meeting just pushed him over the edge, Copeland says. It was the final straw that broke the camel's back. And it also goes on to say that he had a change in behavior. And as we move forward a couple of paragraphs, that weekend, Foster and his wife drove to the eastern shore of Maryland, where they saw their friends, Michael Cardoza and Webster Hubble, and their wives. They played tennis, they swam, and they said he sat in a lawn chair, just kind of sat there in the lawn chair, staring off into space. They said that was just not Vince. He loved to play tennis, and he was always sociable, but he sat over in the corner during that weekend. 2 days later, Foster left the White House parking lot at 1:10 p.m. The precise time when he shot himself could not be pinpointed. After Park Police found his body, they notified the U.S. Secret Service at 8:30 p.m. I think he had pretty much made up his mind that weekend what he was going to do, Copeland says. And it goes on, skip a couple of pages in reference to Ken Starr and his investigation of Vince Foster's death. Starr was a very honorable type guy, says Copeland, and if it did not pertain to our authorized investigation, he did not want to pursue it. And I think he felt that Hillary's personality and her dealings with subordinates in the White House were immaterial to our investigation. Clearly, and I think this is important, Foster might have decided to commit suicide regardless. But based on the FBI investigation, this episode a week before his suicide triggered his decision to end his life. Asked why it was excluded from the report, Starr did not respond. So I find that kind of intriguing that Hillary Clinton is such a witch in person. I'm not shocked, but that she would dress someone down who had been her mentor in Arkansas. So you talk about ungrateful. She most certainly was ungrateful. And so that's one of the chapters there. And I'm going to move on. There are some pictures of Robert Mueller in here. It's like story time, right? I feel like I'm reading to a class. They hit on the Marilyn Monroe stuff with Kennedy, but that's a snooze in my opinion. Talking about that, there is a guy they mention in here. For 12 years, FBI Executive Assistant Director Louis E. Griever was what he calls a government-sanctioned burglar, planting bugs in homes and offices of mafia figures, terrorists, corrupt members of Congress, spies, and foreign intelligence officers. If caught, he could have been shot as an intruder. That sounds like some risky shit right there, doesn't it? So we're going to talk about intelligence mindset. Actually, that's one of them. Where is my Robert Mueller stuff? Robert Mueller. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move forward. Chapter 8. Threesomes. This is salacious enough stuff. It's a lot of fun. These people, this agent, Joseph Judge, he was an agent with the FBI. He was contacted on Sunday morning, May 23rd, 1976. And he was asked to investigate whether some federal money was being used improperly to pay a congressional aide who was performing no work. And it turns out that this woman, Elizabeth Ray, she was 33 years old and hailed from North Carolina. She wrote or was a part of a one-page article in the Washington Post, and it referred to the fact that she was on the congressional payroll of a Representative Wayne L. Hayes, Haws, a Democrat from Ohio at the time. And apparently he had gotten her a job, but she was bragging to the Washington Post that she was not doing any work, that she was actually getting paid. And quote from the Washington Post, "I can't type, I can't file, I can't even answer the phone." The Washington Post story quoted Ray as saying she began working for Hayes in April 1974 as a clerk. Since then, she had not been asked to do any congressional-related work. Instead, she appeared at her Capitol Hill office behind a blank door in the Longworth House office building once or twice a week for a few hours. "Supposedly, I'm on the Oversight Committee," she said, "but I call it the Out-of-Sight Committee." Ray says that she would have sex with Hayes once or twice a week. Typically, Hayes would take her to dinner at one of the Key Bridge Marriott restaurants in Virginia around 7 o'clock p.m. Then they would adjourn to her Arlington apartment. Hayes denied all, saying, "Hell's fire, I'm a happily married man." Indeed, he had just divorced his wife of 38 years and married his personal secretary, but expected Liz Ray to continue as his mistress. Hayes specifically denied ever having had dinner with Ray, but Marion Clark and Rudy Maxa, the two Post reporters who broke the story, were present on different occasions when Hayes dined with Ray at the Hot Shops and Chaparral restaurants in the Key Bridge Marriott. They also listened in on phone calls between Hayes and Ray, confirming their intimate relationship. And oh boy, did it get saucy. Over the course of several interviews, Ray told the agents as they started investigating this that she went to work at the Longworth House office building irregularly. She was allowed to take her dog to work. Whatever came out until now was kind of mild, and Ray would arrange threesomes with Hayes. Elizabeth had to recruit other girls, Judge says. That was part of her job. I don't think she ever had to get more than one other girl. Then Hayes would put them on the payroll. He had virtually unregulated power, so he would get them a job anywhere on the Hill. So this gets interesting. We ended up interviewing a lot of females up there on Capitol Hill on how everything worked. you had these young girls coming and getting hired on Capitol Hill, and they were pretty and starry-eyed, and these were pretty powerful men. The best aphrodisiac in the world is power, and these guys had it. So talk about your Me Too movement. No wonder so much misogyny and sexism has been so well integrated into our systems of government, right? A former congressional aide recalled how in the pre-AIDS days, he participated in a monthly gangbang with a shapely 25-year-old blonde who worked for Senator Alan Cranston, the California Democrat. Once again, Mr. Kessler never fails to have the scandals of the Democrats listed in the book. The word would spread that the girl was out and the guys would go. You'd go up there, join the end of the line. She was very pretty. The woman, who sometimes took on 2 staffers at a time, became known affectionately as the attic girl. Eventually, Liz Ray was given immunity from prosecution, and because of the laws at the time were vague, she eventually came to a plea agreement, and he, Hayes, agreed to resign his chairmanship. He had hoped to become governor of Ohio or Speaker of the House. Instead, he didn't run for re-election, and Hayes died in 1989 at the age of 77. So there you go. Congressional staffers getting hired to have sex with congressmen and do nothing. And wow. I don't know. I'm not really shocked by that. I don't think any of you are either. It's just kind of wild how openly corrupt some of these people were. It's just, it boggles the mind. And there was one other chapter. I dropped my marker. There was another. I'll have to come back. I'll have to review some more stories out of this another time. It's really good. There's another chapter. There's a lot of sex in this. Of course, sex sells, right? I mean, why else am I reading you stories about sex? But it's interesting stuff. And like I said, this is kind of salacious and not really necessarily stuff you're really going to see repeated. You know, maybe I'll touch on this stuff again sometime, but I would rather talk about something that's been researched and vetted and true and discuss that for a minute than to bring someone flaky on that just has a line of bullshit. So that's part of why I'm doing this, Ben. It's a commitment to having good content on the show, reputable content, not just throwing a bunch of crap your way. And anyway, so there's another story in here how there was a great spy, a man and a woman, and they learned a lot of information while spying for the Soviet Union and the Czech Republic by going to swingers parties and meeting up with other D.C. people at these parties. And of course, that was a breach of their security clearance protocols. And that was very compromising. So those people are easy to blackmail for their job or with prosecution. So they were able to manipulate people by going to orgies. So, you know, how good does that get, right? I mean, maybe all political decisions should be made at an orgy. But now that I think about it, that might actually involve someone like Mitch McConnell. I just can't really imagine that. That'd be terrible. Anyway, thanks for hanging on to this show. Tonight, you get chopped liver. You get me. But tomorrow night is Laird Scranton. And we're going to get into some ancient man, ancient culture, and we're going to discuss the new find in the Philippines. And I just want to say thank you to all my friends. Wow, that's loud. Jiggy, Paranormal Hood, Jimmy Pearson. I saw some of your posts. A lot of people are getting screwed on the broadcasting front by YouTube by not being able to use their phones unless they have 1,000 subscribers. And I myself am technically going to have to dance around this issue. But Jimmy Pearson, Mika, Sarah, let's see, Explaining Esoterica, CW Chanter, Hello, dark journalist. You had agreed to come on my show, and I think it's time, so I'm going to call out dark journalist. If you have tuned in tonight, thank you so much. Tomorrow night is Laird Scranton. It'll at least be an hour, and it'll be juicy stuff. It'll be great. So come back for the red meat tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Let me see if I can do this. And